Moments of Truth with Andrew Marks, co-founder of Success Hacker. Today, I am joined by a friend and colleague, Maranda Dzienkonski, Vice President of Customer Success and People Operations at Swiftly. Maranda, thanks for spending some time with me today. Tell us a bit more about your company and your role.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me today, Andrew. So I have been at Swiftly now for just a few weeks shy of a year. As you said, I'm the Vice President of Customer Success and People Ops. So I own everything pretty much post-sale on the customer side, and then I have a small team of People Ops professionals where we manage, the operations for people, HR, office ops, all of that. Swiftly, we are a technology platform that provides, our service is provided to transit agencies. So transit agencies use us for various things, such as, providing real-time passenger information to riders of transit, on-time performance analytics, and various other things they can use our product for. But in a nutshell, we're a data platform for transit agencies.
Interesting. Great. Thank you. So you're in a really interesting role, really important role, considering what we're all going through right now. So with this this coronavirus pandemic that we're all dealing with, that we're trying to deal with and figuring it out things on a day by day basis. Everything's changed dramatically. The way we work, the way we shop, the way we interact with friends, family, and customers. So what do you recommend people do to support your customers, your team, and your business during this challenging time?
Yeah, so look, I think we're all still figuring this out, right? I don't think we have all of the answers. So first, acknowledging that we don't have all of the answers is great, because then it opens up the door for folks like you and I and others to have conversations and kind of brainstorm together and share this information with the community. I think if we break it out into three buckets, like you said, your customer, your team, your business, let's first start with the team, because I think the team is the core and the heart of the business. Of course, you need customers to have a business, but you need your team to support it. So it's kind of like the chicken and egg conversation. Your team, one, making sure that they're supported, and we can go into this a little bit deeper, but I'm just going to summarize it really quickly. Your team, making sure they're supported, they're set up for success, that they feel some sense of security in a time when there's a lot of uncertainty, that you're being very transparent as a leader on where the business is, and what the next steps are, if you know them. If you don't, that you're partnering with them to figure out what the next steps are. On the customer side, and like I said, we can just drill into this a little bit more, but on the customer side, just understand their needs, partner with them to figure out how you can help them. And sometimes helping them means just leaving them alone, letting them work through what they need to work through, and then figuring out where you go from there. And then, on the business side, really understanding if you still have a business. I unfortunately know some businesses that over the past week or two have been kind of wiped out by this. There are industries that are just not operating at least at the same rate they were a couple of weeks ago. And it's impacting a lot of my colleagues, a lot of my friends, folks that are in service industries like restaurants and stuff like that. They're being heavily impacted. So from the business side, figuring out as a leader, how can you make sure your business is viable, from customer success perspective, making sure that your customers are guarded, that you're guardians of their business, because your company is going to need that revenue. So I'm going to pause because I just spit a lot out there.
No, that's that's some good stuff. I would think that the especially gig workers are probably having a particularly tough time now. I'm sure that Uber and Lyft ridership has completely dropped off. Although there are a lot of people though that are still getting food delivered, I would assume, and so maybe it's just a shift.
I was going to say what I'm really interested to see is, I think we're going to see a lot of new businesses spin out of this. Some will prevail, some won't. Folks that are currently, either impacted by this or, losing their jobs over this are going to get creative and think about how could they serve this new normal.
Yeah.
The reality is we don't know how long this is going to go on for. So I think that we're going to see a lot of innovative things come out of this. And you're right, there are still food delivery services, right? Because we're all in our homes and those are considered an essential service. But you're also right on the other note that Lyfts and Ubers and just, the gig economy in general, which as we know, a lot of folks work in the gig economy and rely upon that income, they're being heavily impacted.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I'm sure that they, when they decided to throw their chips in, and I've talked to a lot of these people. When I get into a Uber or Lyft, I talk to the drivers and ask them about, is this your main job? Do you have multiple? Because I'm interested. I actually I did a project for a customer a few years ago on the gig economy, so it's always been interesting to me. A lot of these people are just doing gig work, and
No,
I don't think anybody anticipated something like this
no.
happening. So
I spent time working as a vice president of customer success over at Paired,
mhm.
and it's on-demand workforce placement for the restaurant industry.
Oh, geez.
So as you can imagine, and these folks are very near and dear to my heart. Not only the workers that were doing the work, but the team that built this awesome, platform and this awesome business. I, they're being heavily impacted right now because people can't go in and sit down and eat in restaurants.
Yeah.
A lot of restaurants have switched to you have to pick it up outside the door or they'll deliver to you, which
Right.
means they're probably operating with bare minimal staff.
Hmm.
And they don't have the need or demand to have extra hands.
Hmm.
So the gig economy in that regard too is taking a hit.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. All right. So let's go back to you had three or three areas that we talked
Yeah.
about. We talked about team, we talked about customer, and talked about business. So when you talk about team, you mentioned supported, security, and transparency. So let's drill into that. When you say supported, are we talking about making sure that they have technologies like this, like Zoom, to be able to communicate with customers, or what do you mean by that?
Yeah. So, I mean, it's everything from technology to knowing that the company has their back, knowing that they have a job. Hopefully that's the case. We're very fortunate where I'm at right now at Swiftly. That is the case. We have jobs, and we've reassured our team that that is the case for now. That we all have jobs, which has freed up the mental bandwidth that we would spend worrying about that to where we can focus on the business and the customers, right?
Right.
But I also think it's supporting your teams when they're in fear of their family's health and their health. It's having that extreme empathy and putting yourself in their shoes, right? And understanding that sometimes they may just need that space. So encourage that. Encourage if they need to go out and just go for a walk around the block, social distancing, of course.
Yeah. Yeah.
But encourage them to take that time
Hmm.
to be with their family, to be with their thoughts. I think that's crucial.
Center
Um,
themselves.
yeah,
Right. Don't
yeah,
stress out if the kid hops into the video conference,
exactly.
because we're all
Exactly.
dealing with the same thing, right?
Absolutely. We're all in the same place. We're all in the same place. I
Yeah.
mean, I was watching the news here locally yesterday, and the weatherman was giving the weather forecast from home, and his dog came into the frame.
Right.
And like, we're all human, right? So
Yeah.
no
Sure.
big deal. Um, yeah, and I think also providing outlets for them, whether it's, I see a lot of companies, and we're getting ready to do our first virtual happy hour. We're going to be doing,
Or we.
Success Hackers is
Yep.
actually getting one
Yes.
as well. I saw that.
Yeah, we're doing that today. We're starting
Yeah,
today. Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. Fun.
So
Yeah.
we're doing those types of things. We're doing trivia. We're doing a talent show.
Love it.
our co-founder, he is a fantastic pianist, and he gave us a little mini concert at lunch last week. So, finding ways to still have that human connection with your team is important, because this is for folks who've never worked remote for this amount of time, it's jarring. I don't care if you're at home with your spouse and your kids and you're not technically alone, it's still jarring. You're not used to being in a room by yourself or not with your coworkers. So making sure you're figuring out ways to facilitate those interactions is important.
It definitely is jarring. I mean, I've been working at home now for 6 years, but it took me a good 6 months uh, to to ramp myself up mentally working at home.
Yeah.
So some of the things though, just for those that are listening, I think some of the things are really important if you can do it when you're working from home. Kind of going off the track here, but I think it's important for people to understand. Have a space that's
Yeah.
just for your workspace, ideally with a door that you can close, and people understand. The rest of the folks are at home, especially now because everybody's at home. Understand not to bother you during certain periods of time if possible. And the other thing, a couple other things I think are important is you don't go to work even if it's at home in your pajamas.
Right.
Right. Get dressed like you normally would.
I did that this morning.
Yeah.
I've been doing it every day. I get up, I put my makeup on,
Yeah.
I take a shower, and it makes me
Exactly.
feel because nobody's really going to see me, but it makes me feel like I'm going to work.
Exactly.
When I'm going to the office.
Exactly. And if you have now, I've got my window shades drawn on because I'm recording, but normally my windows are open. I'm getting some sunlight. That's important. Now, one of the things that I used that helped me a lot when I was transitioning into the ramping up was walking downtown and having lunch a couple times a week downtown. So I live walking distance. Can't do that right now, but at least just getting out and walking, maintaining the social distance, as you mentioned before, or just going out in the backyard and getting some vitamin D from the sun. Right, those so important for our not just our physical health, but our mental health.
Yeah, I think you're hitting up on it really well. I'm just thinking, about how easy it is to get into work when you're not with people. And next thing you know, you've blown through 3, 4, 5 hours, and you haven't really moved a lot, right?
Yes.
And while it's great for productivity, it's probably really terrible for your physical health and your mental health.
Yes.
So yeah, no, that's all really great. And I think another thing as well that's a big change is managing optics. And what I mean by that, like when you're sitting in an office with your team and you need something, what do? You're just like, hey, Steve, have you thought about blah, 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 blah? And you get that immediate interaction.
Right.
But when you're at home, you have to message them.
Yeah.
And you can't see if they're there, if they're acknowledging you, and that painful waiting can be painful, right? And you're like, oh, I just need that answer. Where are you? Where are you? Are they there? So there are things you can do to kind of manage those optics as well, right? So setting a status on your Slack or whatever messaging system you're at. If you're in a meeting, mark yourself as in a meeting. If you are away, like let's say you get up for a 15-minute break, throw a little walking, emoji on next to your name so people know. If you are at your desk, try hard to be responsive because it's stressful when you're sitting there waiting for someone to get back to you. So just trying to help feed the information and manage the optics.
Yeah, those are great suggestions. Slack is a great tool for that. I mean, we've been running as a virtual company for nearly 6 years now, and about a year into it, Todd, my co-founder, as you know, said that we need to implement Slack if we're going to do this thing virtually. We now have like a team of 10 people, and everybody is on Slack, and it's helpful. It can be chaotic at times, and we have to go through and clean Slack out. There's a certain amount of Slack hygiene that you need to do regularly, but it's particularly useful in that respect of it's the virtual looking over the cube wall and saying, "Hey, can I ask you something about this?"
Absolutely,
Yeah,
absolutely.
for sure. So we talked about the team. We talked so supported. They feel secure. You're being transparent with them. All very important.
Yeah,
Um, so let's talk about the business, and then I want to talk about the customer, right? Because I think that's
yeah,
where we can probably go really deep, given that we're all about customer success. So the business, they understand if you have a business. Tell me more
yeah,
about that.
yeah. So the majority of the folks that I work with are in startups. I do, of course, have some colleagues that are in well-established companies, but the majority of the people that I'm going to, talk to are folks in startups. So this is kind of more coming from a startup perspective. So one, I just want to call out everybody's being hit right now. Whether you're a big company, a little company, everybody's being hit. So I think as a leader, it's important that we're just first acknowledging that, right? Don't try to brush it under the rug that everybody's not, because guess what? Everybody is, and likely you are too, right? So, I don't know if this is a good or a bad thing, but I've lived now through Y2K. I've lived through 9/11. I was in Michigan working in the automotive industry when the automotive industry market crashed. I was working at a company that filed Chapter 11, because we purchased our raws at a very high price, and just overnight, they were worth next to nothing,
Yeah,
right?
bottom dropped out of it. Yeah,
Totally.
remember that.
Um, and you know, I've been through quite a few of these, and the reality is it depends on the business. But you, as a vice president of customer success or a CCO or whatever it may be, you have to be a guardian of the business. If there is no business, then you have no team and you have no customers. And what does it mean to be a guardian of the business? Well, one, it's to look at your current financial state, an honest look with, of course, partnering with the other executives, figuring out what your runway is. If you sign no new customers right now, and just assume, you may not sign, depending on your business, you may not sign new customers for a quarter or two. We don't know how long this is going to go on. But we all know probably pretty well that funding in the startup world is going to be tight. If you haven't read the Sequoia Black Swan email that's passed, or blog post that's been being passed around, you should. Part of it is probably hyped up a little bit, but it's definitely a reality that we're all going to face, that startup funding is going to be tight. So making sure that if you have money in the bank, you're using it thoughtfully. You're looking at your hiring and figuring out what you really need. You're looking at the resources you have, right? So I had a renewals manager position posted, and I'm going to be pausing on that and just shifting resources. In figuring out, okay, where can we handle this or absorb this within our team? So it's things like that. Travel, the extra expenses that we probably have on little things. So of course, don't cut everything to where your team doesn't have things that build morale, but be a guardian of your revenue.
Yeah, that makes
Kind of what
sense.
I mean.
That makes sense.
And there are other tactics and things as well. You want to, of course, be super sensitive, and we'll talk about the customer side, but early renewals. So I have 1, 3, and 5-year contracts. And, you know, early renewals is definitely a way to go. So if I have someone who's renewing in 6 months, could I get them to renew this next quarter? Could I cut them a deal and figure out, could I, get that renewal done now to secure that revenue
Yeah,
earlier, so I
that
don't
makes
have
sense.
to worry about it. We don't know what's going to happen. This hopefully turns around quickly, but we should plan as if it's not. We shouldn't rest on our laurels. We should create a plan. Don't panic. Don't
Right.
create panic.
Right.
but be smart
Right.
and ahead of the ball.
Yeah. No, that makes sense. That makes sense. Okay, so let's talk about the customer. I was actually that this was a topic of conversation yesterday. I do my coaching, so we have our 3 coaching cohorts that we run,
Yeah.
um, and I did my coaching calls yesterday, and all 3, level 1, level 2, level 3, brought up how do we support our customers, um, during this time, and so I'd love to get your take on that.
Yeah, it kind of goes back to what I said at the beginning, like we don't know all of the answers, so let's
Right.
brainstorm these. And the answer, the first part is it really depends on your customer. Depends on what's going on with their business. If your customer is Safeway right now, the grocery store here,
Yeah.
you're going to need something very different from you
Yeah.
than a restaurant
Right.
or, a big business, right? So one, first, just really look and understand who are your customers.
Right.
And if you hit multiple, if you hit different industries, like, I worked for HelloSign for 3 years, I couldn't say my customers at HelloSign are all this because that's not true because I hit multiple different industries. But what I would first do is I would take a look and figure out what industries I'm primarily supporting and then create a plan for each of those industries. So let's talk about public transportation because that's what I'm in right now. Um, Public transportation, as we all know, ridership is down, and ridership is a big basis of where revenue comes from for of course they get funding, but where revenue comes from for these transit agencies. So how I would approach them versus how I would approach a restaurant customer would be very different,
Of
right? So
course.
if restaurants were my customers as they were before, um, I I would probably be hurting right now
Uh-huh.
because I'm not going to try to market to them. I'm not going to try to sell to them.
No.
I'm not, they're in survival mode.
Right.
So I would then switch to survival mode with them. How do
What
I
can I
help
do? Right.
survive?
What can I do to help?
What
What can
can I
I do
do?
to help? What can I do to help? Yeah.
Versus if you have customers that are thriving and surviving, it's how do I partner with them to make sure they're keeping their head above water,
Right.
right? In a different way. Instead of like making sure that they have a business, you're trying to make sure that you can support them and help them with efficiencies.
Right.
But yeah, understand their needs, I guess, is the sum of that. Making sure you understand and partner with them on how you can help them, figure out what they need, and then bring that back internally. Talk to marketing, and instead of marketing the newest coolest thing that your engineering team is building or has built, figure out how you can take and use the current use cases to optimize your product and get marketing to send out things around, did you know you could do this with our product? Did you know you could do that and it'll get you this, right? So
Hmm.
think about how to help them get creative. uh, Sales, same thing. I know a lot of sales teams are currently stopping selling,
Yeah.
which is really scary for a sales team.
Yeah. Of
And
course
it's
it
not
is.
just where I'm at, it's everywhere.
Right.
Because it's not, it's kind of how do you balance out that human side of being very thoughtful and not being tacky and trying to sell to people during a time like this, but still maintaining your business. So with sales, it's, how do you partner with sales as a customer success leader to bring them in on any upsells or renewals or expansion opportunities, or how can they help educate? How can they become partners? And honestly, I think the most important thing is how does the product team shift? How do they shift from building for the future to building for the now?
Yeah.
um, how do they shift and understand how needs have changed and how can they help build that now to make sure your product is sticky and you're providing continuous value to your customer base, that when we emerge from this, the partnership is stronger than ever.
Yeah. Interestingly, I had a student in one of my cohorts yesterday that works for a company that deals with property management software. It's property management platform, and and she was telling me how in the last couple of weeks they've had some conversations with some of their largest customers as we saw this thing starting to, and they're based out of Europe, so they were experiencing everything ahead of us, a few weeks ahead of us. And she said that she was really proud of her product team because they gathered all this feedback, all this information from the customers. What can we do to help? Right? What can we do to help during this current situation? And they were able to communicate with the product team, not just the features, but the narrative around the features. So why this was important for the customers. And the product team was agile enough to reprioritize some of the functionality that they were working on their product roadmap so that they could address the immediate needs of these customers. And that was the exact right response. And I actually told her that she should be proud of her product team and her organization. That is an example of a very customer focused organization.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. That's really key during these times, right? If I'm sure everybody is, but my inbox is just being slammed with a lot of like not only coronavirus content, but marketing content.
Yeah.
And some folks are kind of taking a little bit of advantage of the situation, and I find it to be very tacky. So I'll give you an example. I'm not going to name any companies, but there is a very large company out there that sent me an email, and it was clearly a marketing email, but it was very specialized, and it said something to the effect of, during this economy, how are you going to secure talent? Have you looked at our tool to help you secure talent? And, and of course I'm just giving you the gist of it, but I read it and I'm like, ugh, like, wow, just wow. Because that's the last thing on my, eventually I'm going to need to secure talent, but that's the last thing on my mind right now.
Exactly.
And I think if we put ourselves in everybody's position, especially our customers' positions, that's the same thing. It's the last thing on their mind right now.
Yeah.
So we need to figure out what is on their mind, and how do we help with that?
Well, what's on their mind is, and I don't like using the term taking advantage or capitalizing, because I don't want it to sound like that. But what's on people's minds right now is, how am I and how's my family?
Yeah.
Right. And so I look at that as a opportunity, especially with customers that have been disengaged, to just reach out to them, and you got to do it in a meaningful way. Say, hey, this is the one time. So here's the one situation. Because I constantly tell people I hate the just checking in email. It's horrible.
This is
okay. But here's the one time. Hey, I'm checking in to see how you are doing and how your family is doing. Yes. Right. This is a good excuse to do the checking in. How are things going? Right. Because it's not about how are things going with your business, how are things going with our product. It's how are things going with you. And good customer success managers that have either built relationships with their customers or want to build relationships, those types of relationships with the customers, and become that trusted advisor, can ask those types of things.
Yeah, absolutely. That's funny you say that, because I think it was last week, maybe mid to early last week. It's so funny because this feels like it's been going on forever now, but the reality is it's only been a couple weeks for us, right? Yeah. But just a week or two ago, that's what we had decided to do as a customer success team, just to reach out and say, and I'm the same as you, I'm like, don't ever reach out unless you can provide value. I've been saying it for years. I'm like, if you're just saying, hey, how are you? Stop. They have enough going on. But right now, say, hey, how are you?
Yeah, exactly.
It's a total shift in everything that I've said up until this point. But it's 100% the right thing to do. Be a human first, be a customer success manager next, right? But be human first,
and employ that empathy, right? That I'm reaching out, I'm taking your perspective because I'm living it too. Things have changed, right? and we're all in this, right? And we're
Yeah.
all trying to figure this out. And
I think,
you know,
well,
it's so
here's the
important.
thing too, that, I think if we leave, we're going to all leave this better humans, I hope. Because the reality is it's bringing this, it takes this virus for us to really like invoke that human side.
Yeah.
When in reality, we should have been doing it all along,
Yeah.
to a point, because everybody has external noise.
Yeah.
Everybody has things going on that impact them that we don't think about. I'm not saying become a counselor to your customers by any means,
Right.
but always approach situations understanding that the business that you're operating or you're working in isn't the world for everyone,
Right.
and you have to think about that always
Right.
when you're reaching out and when you're doing business.
Right.
So
Thinking customer first. So important
absolutely,
in our roles.
totally.
So one last thing I thought we would talk about then, you know, given this current state of affairs, but this is definitely something that I think can be relevant after we get past this. And, how do you manage? How do you effectively manage a a distributed team like this, a virtual team, essentially? I know we touched on a few of those things. We touched on Slack and the virtual meetings. Any other thoughts? Any other tips for
Yeah,
folks that have to
I
do that?
it's funny because I've managed a remote team before, right? But this is so different because I've always had a remote team along with individuals in the office, and I was in the office, right?
Right.
So I think first things first is definitely, and people who've worked with me have heard me preach the value of OKRs. I think now it's so important that you have goals with your team and everybody understands, what their piece is, what their part of the picture is, and what they're driving, making sure that everyone on your team feels like they can add value every day. Because when it comes down to it, once again, human side, we all want to feel like we're doing something, we're contributing, we're adding value. And the minute your team, in the office or out, and right now it's out, stops feeling like that, they become disengaged, and then it can spiral, right? So one, making sure everybody is really tuned in on, this is where the company needs to be, this is where we are, this is the goals we have, and here's your part. And then having regular check-ins on that part. Some folks are doing daily stand-ups, but at the least, check in, via Slack with your team members every day. Have a weekly team meeting with your team. You should have a bigger company meeting, hopefully once a week as well, with everybody. So you are all on the same page of, this is the current state of affairs, this is the goal we're still marching towards, or the goal has now shifted, like let's recalibrate, right? But having that regular check-in. I talked a little bit about it before too, but over communicate. Make sure you make yourself available to your team, that, if they reach out to you, that you are responsive. Don't wait for them to reach out to you. Reach out to them, but always make yourself available. And lastly, I think feedback is really crucial. One of the things that a lot of us don't think through, I have a very sarcastic sense of humor, which Andrew,
I do.
it's one of my,
It's
great
one of
things.
your endearing qualities.
Not everybody gets that,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Everybody gets that sarcasm. And it's really important that during this time, we really think about our tone, and we think about, how we are portraying ourselves and how our message is being read. I am not perfect at this by any means, so it's something, that's why I bring it up. I have to consistently think about it when I'm typing something out. I'm like, are they going to understand that's a dad joke, or does that just
Yeah.
horrible,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's new for people who haven't had to do this before, right? Because usually you could make that dad joke or that be really snarky and have that sarcasm, and they would see it, and then you'd laugh and you'd, march on, right?
Right.
That is not the case right now. So that's another thing that leaders and just coworkers should think through when setting up each other up for success remotely. there are so many other things that we could do, of course, but
I
I
know.
think those three things are probably the most crucial at the moment.
Yeah. Well, we could spend a lot more time on just this subject. So,
Totally.
but those are some good thoughts and some good best practices, and uh, and I appreciate the time, taking the time with me today.
Yeah.
As usual, I love our conversations. It's good to see you. It's good to hear from you, and I'm glad that you and your family are doing well, and so I leave you with stay healthy, be safe, and keep yourself centered. You know,
Yes.
go take a walk, get out in the sun,
Yes.
and just remember this is just a and for everybody out there, this is just a road bump, and we'll all get past this.
Totally. I can't reiterate that enough. I know it feels right now that everything is uncertain because it is, but look, we've been through so many times like this, and I know that at least for a lot of folks on my team, that may have been born shortly after 9/11, or maybe even further down the line than that, this may feel well, probably not. I'm doing the math. Maybe a little bit before that, but too young to remember. This may feel really terrible, but just know that you have a lot of folks who have been through very similar things that are here for you, myself included. And, laughter is the best medicine. I'll just leave it at that. Like, try to find humor in the little things when things seem scary and uncertain.
Love it. Great advice. Thanks, Miranda.
Awesome. Thank you, Andrew.